Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. If I Were the Devil, the War on Love. It's Danny here, and it is Monday evening, and it's been raining off and on today, but grateful to be here with you. Sorry I'm getting this done and out so late, but here we are. So we're going to continue in our series of shame for the War on Love. And let's just start off as we always do. Why are we here? Because the greatest commandment is what? To love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. So this podcast is all about how the enemy is working hard to keep us from loving God first, then ourselves, and not being able to love our neighbor well. So if I were the devil and wanted to cause harm and keep people from loving God, self, and others, I would use the old wounds to whisper old lies and create the spirit of fear, shame, confusion, and overwhelm in his people. I would use patterns in the world to keep people constantly overwhelmed, yet posting smiles of a perfect life of having all the things money can buy and happiness, keeping out the rest of the story of how anxious, empty, and stuck people really feel. They will believe my lies in the world that everyone else has it all figured out and they are just not good enough and need to try harder and do more. And the many ways that the world offers them to escape from big feelings through alcohol, TV, managing their material possessions, the pattern can just keep going on and on if I can keep them from getting to the real issues. If I can keep them too busy to stop and self-reflect. If I can keep them isolated and from getting to the truth. Keep them in hiding, too ashamed to admit that they are overwhelmed. Then they can never connect with someone else to hear, "Oh, you too? I thought you had it all together. Actually, I struggle too. Let's figure this out together." As a recap, this is a series on shame that we're in. And the first episode in this series on shame was Shame Keeps Us in Hiding. And then the second one was the 4 entry points of shame. And that was early attachment ruptures, family-based shame, internalized as identity, trauma and betrayal trauma, and then shame-based teaching. And actually, as I was getting ready for this episode, I realized that I should add a 5th entry point of shame, which is sin that is chronic and not transformed under Christ. Because someone who knows Christ would have a value system that they are to obey Christ and to love him, and being aware that they are actively sinning and not surrendering that sin to the Lord, they would feel sin. They would feel the weight of sin. They would feel shame. And so I just wanted to add that to another kind of entry point of shame. It's the kindness and the love of the Lord that will lead us to repentance. But if we are not surrendering and we're continuing knowing that it's the wrong thing that we're doing and we keep doing it, then we're definitely going to feel shame, because that's what sin does to us. It's the burden, it's the weight. And then we need to confess and repent, and then we can give the Lord our sin, because there is no condemnation in Christ. But unrepentant sin is absolutely going to create that shame pattern. And then last week, I had an extremely bizarre situation at church on Sunday. Of course, I recorded the podcast on Monday. I entitled it, "How God Used My Being Frozen to Capture My Attention to Allow Me to Deep Dive into My Wounds That Still Needed Healed." And that was completely unscripted. And that's what I'm finding as I'm doing this podcast. A lot of times it's just organically happening to me, and I'm using that material in the middle, in the messy of it, to bring to you, my listeners, whoever you are, wherever you are, just what this spiritual battle looks like in real life. At the time of this recording, it's August 17th, 2026. And some people have some idea about what spiritual warfare looks like. And sure, there's demonic possession and there's people who are Satanists and there's terrible things in the world. But as believers, as people in the here and now, day-to-day stuff, we know that we are in a spiritual battle, and how it shows up is not with a devil and a red tail and horns. This is how it shows up to keep us from loving the Lord with all our heart, all our mind, and all our soul. And it's these distractions. And then it's the way that we respond when something does happen. So today I'm going to give you more of a follow up since walking through that experience, unpacking it, what I've learned on the other side of it. By the way, I am completely at peace about what happened last Sunday at church. I am completely grateful that the Lord used that. I don't know that He caused it, but certainly used that as an opportunity for me to stop and to get curious and to do deeper reflection. I felt that it would be most beneficial to actually go ahead and walk through with you as I reflected back how I responded in that situation, what I did, what I learned from it, and then what I'm going to continue to do about that as an kind of an action plan, as well as give you a tool to use that I give my clients. So I'm going to go pretty vulnerable, pretty in depth, and as I'm unpacking what happened last Sunday at church. So I want to though just be very clear that I'm not feeling ashamed anymore. I'm not feeling judged or criticized by anyone in my church family for my frozen response. All of the thoughts and feelings that I was having were all part of my unhealed wounds that were poked. And I just want to say that on the other side of this processing, I'm just thankful. And also, I wanted to say that had I not gotten curious and leaned into those big feelings, then I could have just masked them or shut them down or just believed the lies that some people struggle with. Things like that feelings are bad, they're weak, they're not useful, that it's all spiritual warfare. And I do want to be very clear that my wounds and how my body responded is not the spiritual warfare. So, what happened to me in my childhood that created the wounds was hurt people who hurt me, people who were unhealthy, people who had not been in recovery, people who have never made an amends, who have never healed themselves to be able to reach out to me from all those years ago and to acknowledge the harm that was caused to me. So my feelings, though, were not the spiritual warfare. And I hope that's really clear. It just hit me as I was kind of saying that out loud, that our feelings are not the spiritual warfare. My body was responding to show me that there was something unhealed. My thoughts that were bombarding me in church, the overwhelm, the anxiety that was keeping me from even being able to, focus on worship and be present and make up all these stories about myself and the people around me, that was my body's way of responding to the situation, but wasn't the spiritual warfare. Now, had I have not taken those thoughts captive, and then perhaps then I would have sinned or been disobedient or turned around and hurt somebody else, then I would have perpetuated the sin. But the feelings that I was having was not the spiritual warfare at the time. At least that's not how I see it. As a therapist, as somebody who has done a lot of recovery work, the spiritual warfare was the lies that were planted and the wounds that were caused a long time ago that got poked last Sunday. So the other thing I want to say is that anything uncomfortable in my body, some people believe that's the enemy tormenting them, and it should just be shut down before asking God what He might want to show you or to show me. And I noticed that I wanted to just get right into the solution when I was having that experience. I can't change the fact that I didn't go up when I was supposed to go up. And so I'm going to accept what I can't change, and it's fine. It's fine. And yet I recognized that, and I thought, but there's a reason that this just happened. And that's what led me down a lot of the insight that I'm going to be sharing. So I hope all of that is clear. So I would have missed this healing, and it was a lot if I would have just, believed some of those lies that some people believe, that feelings are bad and weak and they're not useful and there's no point in exploring it, et cetera, et cetera. So what I had was an emotional trigger, which is a strong reaction to a situation. And those are there to teach us something. Why am I reacting a 10 out of 10 to a situation that really, I don't know that it warrants this level of emotional overwhelm? So our emotional triggers are like a check engine light on your dashboard. And just like that, it would be unwise to ignore it or just to pretend that check engine light is not on in your car, right? Or just pray it away or get so busy you forget about it. No, you want to lean into it and get it figured out. Why, what is going on? And naming it. What is this feeling that I'm having? And then what caused it? And then what does the Lord want to do in this? And I'm going to say this something that sounds kind of strange, but I'm going to clarify the thing is not the thing. And I've seen this over and over. Sometimes when we experience a trigger, we think it's one thing, but it's really not the thing that we think it's going to be. So what happened, as just a quick recap, is I was supposed to open up for a church service, but I felt frozen, not in fear though. I just froze and I just delayed, and I had this weird experience of racing thoughts and confusion. Then I felt embarrassed and concern and fear and then shame. I felt like I wanted to run and hide. I was just super hyper vigilant about the people around me. My mind was just reading faces and body posture. I was making up stories in my mind about what they were thinking and saying. And I wanted to focus on worship, but I couldn't. And then I felt out of control and helpless. And that made me feel concerned and angry. And then at one point, like I just wanted to be like, no, this is no big deal. But then I'm like, but that really kind of comes off as pride and being flippant. And that didn't seem to be an appropriate, authentic response. And I was really I was confused because my topic was called Speak Up. That's what I was going to be praying on as I opened up our church service. And so I was wondering, was this what the Lord is trying to teach me, is like, even though I missed my cue, am I supposed to just speak up now? And so I was in my mind and just, gosh, I'm trying to discern what the Lord wanted me to do now. And so that's the context in case you missed last episode, but this might not make full sense if you're just catching this podcast or this episode in the middle. So why am I sharing this experience with you? Probably some of you, if not all of you, have had some sort of similar experience. It probably was a different event. It was different triggers, different people, obviously, different context. Maybe this happened when you were younger, but I believe that this is a human experience, but we just haven't heard maybe somebody else tell it. So I am telling this from my experience because I'm not having any shame about this. And I noticed that some people are very uncomfortable with vulnerability. And sometimes I kind of question, am I being too vulnerable on a podcast where I have no idea who's listening to this? And yet I feel like that is the one thing in our human experience that we absolutely need more of, not less. And I'm in a position in my life where I feel like this is just something that I can offer. I can offer by going deep into my experience to potentially help someone else. Jesus left the 99 for the one. And so if I can help one person that would say, oh my gosh, you just put words to my experience, then I feel like it was worth all the prep time for that episode and all the editing and me being vulnerable. So I am very aware of my experiences because I am a person in recovery. And that's what recovery teaches us. It teaches us to slow down, to become aware, to ask questions, to get curious. And I have been sober and working on my healing journey a long time. So I'm not saying that I have everything all figured out. And that's why I'm sharing it with you, but I'm sharing with you so that you know that you're not alone. I'm a believer, I'm a therapist, but I am not new to recovery work or understanding trauma. And what I want you to hear from this is that I still have things to work on. So yeah, it only took me not even a full week to get on the other side of that and glean so much goodness and fruit out of that experience and an action plan and all the things. But please don't think that you're ever going to get to, or anybody gets to, a point where they're not going to struggle anymore. There's an acronym for SHAME, should have already mastered everything. And I want you to know that you're never going to master everything. So here's what I did in response. So when that thing happened last Sunday, what did I do? One is I allowed myself to wrestle. I moved from feeling embarrassed and ashamed, wanting to run and hide, to jump straight into the solution, like I said, through the serenity prayer and just acceptance of it. So, giving myself permission to wrestle. Number two, I sought discernment. God, what do you want me to do now? I sought leadership. I went to my pastor and said, "Hey, I'm so sorry I missed my call to go up to the altar to open up church. I can so slip this in now if you want me to go up. He's the leader. What do you want me to do?" And he said, "It's okay. We'll just have you go next week," which, by the way, I did go yesterday at church, and it was totally fine. No, I had no residual effects of what happened the week before. It was fine. But number three is I fought the urge to leave. I wanted to run away. And so that is one of those check engine signs. I wanted to run and leave, and I didn't. Number four is I got vulnerable with my friend in the lobby. I let her see me upset and be vulnerable. And that is really hard to do for a person who is wrestling with shame or feeling like I shouldn't be feeling this way. Or what's wrong with me? And instead, I might have even said those things, but I still said those things to a safe person. And then that allowed her to speak encouragement and to pray. I was also honest with myself and with safe people. So I wasn't in denial. And hear this, I also did not spiritual bypass. I did not say, the Lord just allowed that for a reason. And yes, it is true, but I did not do that until I had fully walked through the entire experience. And I could say that with authenticity. Spiritual bypassing is you put a band-aid on a gushing wound, you put a scripture on it, you put an amen on it without fully understanding and asking the Lord, is there anything you want me to see, hear, know, or do from this experience? Because otherwise we could be missing something huge. Number six is when I got home, and this was a biggie, I got home and I noticed that I was not able to get honest with my husband. I did not want him to see me upset. And that is one of the things that I leaned into later, and my journaling revealed a lot. And I may actually read some of that today. And then number seven is when I was not able to connect with my husband because I was not feeling safe with him, even though he gives me zero reason to feel unsafe with him, which is how I know that was my stuff, not his. He has done an immense amount of work. And so that was said everything about me and the work that I need to do, not about him. Number seven is I left with my Bible and my journal and my dog because I didn't want to be around my husband. And I did need to get my dog to go get a shot at a clinic at Tractor Supply. If you don't know that, they have a clinic on Sunday, and you get vaccinations and things for your animal a whole lot cheaper than what it would be at the vet. Sorry, vets, but I got kids in college, so I need to save money where I can. And then after the vet, I called a close friend. Actually, on my way, I called a friend of mine, and we met at a park. And it just so happened that she was taking some time to slow her afternoon down after church and was thinking about what she wanted to do. Did she want to go to a park? And I happened to call her, and she was only a few minutes from where I was. And she lives about 30 minutes away. I don't know, you call it a God shot. Some people might call it a coincidence. Okay. But I just say that because there was so much fruit that came out of that connection, I think definitely for me, and I think her as well, we can say the Lord allowed that even for more healing to take place. His word says, when two or three are gathered in my name, I will be in the midst. But shame and our attachment wounds, they generally don't pull us to somebody in a healthy connection. They generally pull us to isolation until we can clean up and get ourselves together, and then we can be around people. And that's how we know somebody is securely attached, is they're okay to lean into people in healthy relationships instead of isolating. So then number 8 is I got home, and then I allowed myself to go away with Jesus in the woods. I put my to-do list on the back burner. I put everything on the back burner and just said, I really need to go be with Jesus in the woods. So I did that. And I was out there for about an hour, just journaling, reflecting, praying. God was just allowing me to experience the beauty of his creation with a woodpecker that came, and a deer came up behind me, and I've never heard a deer snort. So that was super cool. A hummingbird. flew right over top of my head. I've never seen a hummingbird inside of the woods like that. So I just had this beautiful time where I really felt the presence of the Lord was all around me. And then I went to prayer night. So later that night, I was like, I just felt the pull to continue to spend time with the Lord and with community, and had a really amazing connection time with some other women where they were able to be vulnerable. We were able to pray for one another. And it was just a really sweet time. And then number 10 is I named what was happening for myself. So that gave me a ton of clarity and made room for grace and compassion. So by the time I wrote in my journal with entry, which was what just happened, what happened to my brain? I think I said that on last Monday's podcast episode. I was actually concerned at one point. What is wrong with my brain that I'm just felt frozen like that? And I was like, do I have dementia? It was crazy. And really, by the time I wrote down again all the things that had been going on, it gave me, it's like, oh, okay, yes, of course I felt overwhelmed. And so that took a lot of that shame and a lot of that fear that something's wrong with me down. Number 11 is I kept talking about it with healthy people instead of hiding and pretending. So I did eventually talk to my husband. I'll cover that more on number 14. But I went to my overcomers meeting. I shared about it in my recovery meeting. And y'all, I actually got a 1-day key tag for I admitted that I am powerless over this feeling of hustle. I don't know how to say it any more than that, but I think I've just called a lot of what I've experienced in my adult life, ADHD. And yes, I do have that clinical diagnosis. And I think one of the major things that I have discovered through journaling and asking questions and being in prayer is I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Do I have these ADHD symptoms and diagnosis because of some of these generational patterns and my attachment wounds and trauma? And that's why I have a hard time resting. So that's a whole nother, I'm not going to go into all of that. But all I wanted to say was that the fruit that came out of me asking these questions and doing all these things that I'm talking about really has helped me even get not just clarity and validation, but also realize this pattern that I have been in for a very long time is really rooted in scarcity, in a scarcity mindset. And I'm going to do a whole episode on this. I'm still unpacking this fully. This is not a new concept to me, but the ways in which tying this to my sense of overwhelm and the ways in some of my patterns and the reasons why I do things, I think it's actually coming from the scarcity mindset, which is basically there's not enough. There's not enough time. There's not enough money. Even if you have enough money, it's going to go away. There's not enough love. There's not enough safety. It's not enough. And that's really closely related to shame because shame says I'm not enough. I have enough. I have abundance, which is a kingdom mindset, or I don't. That was just one more wild thing that has been revealed. So number 12 of what I did in response, and that was beneficial, but I had a training with this incredible program that I'm doing for my role as a therapist and also a relationship coach, and it's called Relational Life Therapy. And I'm in my practicum right now. And that's another thing. I just added 4 hours into my week that I just have a tendency to be like, oh, it's just one more thing. And yet that's a big chunk of time. I had fallen into this pattern of taking on new things while not taking something else off or putting on pause. And that's how things just topple over. If you think about a waitress with a tray, she just keeps adding and adding without delivering any of the drinks and the meals on her tray. At some point, it's going to topple over. And I think that's why I was feeling so overwhelmed as well, of just minimizing all these changes in my schedule. But anyway, so I had this training on Monday, and that was the day after I had that experience. And I used that opportunity in my practicum. And I've got really gifted therapist who I'm meeting with, who is going to be asking me these questions. I'm going to go ahead and share about what just happened yesterday. And then when I was ready, I read my husband my super vulnerable 15 pages of journal entries. And that allowed me to be raw with him and cry with him as I shared about the childhood wounds that I realized that I still needed healing from. And then that takes me to the next aspect of shame. And we are going to be covering attachment wounds I thought we were going to get to that today, but I try to keep these podcasts not so long. And as I started unpacking this, I thought maybe this would be more beneficial for you guys. And then we'll get into attachment next time. But it kicked up attachment wounds for me. So that's the tie in. But here are some insights that I gained. So I walked you through the 15 things that I did and how I used that emotional trigger to really go deep and glean all the things that I just shared that I did. And then now I'm sharing with you the insights that I gained from doing that. Number one is I was able to name that I had been on the brink of burnout and I had been in denial about it. Why had I been in denial about it? That's because one of the patterns of the world is comparison. So I think it's Teddy Roosevelt who said comparison is a thief of joy. And I was in comparison and I had this belief that I should be able to handle everything that I was doing. Now, on a normal week, I have an idea of what my capacity level is. However, as humans, I don't think we always take into account that we're getting older. Our capacity level changes with our hormones, especially women who are in middle age with their hormones changing. Our sleep needs change, our self-care needs change. And then just everything going on with the kids, some good, some challenging, a mix of both. And when I just didn't really consider that I needed to take some more things off my plate. I was keeping everything that I had on my plate and then just doing these other things in addition. And then going, okay, when I wrote everything down, again, that gave me a lot of clarity. Number two, I leaned into some of the changes that I needed to make. I used a tool that I would give my clients normally. I actually journaled my values again, in addition to the tool that I used. Then I wrote down what is happening versus what I think it should be, what I should be able to handle just is. What can I handle? And I'm going to offer you this quote. I don't know who coined it, but it's true. When we argue with reality, we lose 100% of the time. So instead of what should I be able to handle and just said, what can I handle in this season of my life? And then adjust accordingly. Number three, what I learned is that I still have more work to do in as far as healing from my attachment wounds. And that's evidenced by me not allowing my husband to come into that pain with me and also what came out in my journaling. And number four is it opened up a lot of insight for me about biblical rest. Now that's something that came on the radar, I don't know, maybe in 2021, 2022. For me, of just this idea of that I do need to rest more, but I haven't always implemented that well. And I think one of the spiritual battles is that we're on the treadmill of doing too much, but feeling like it's never enough and living in constant overwhelm, but not knowing how to get out of that and just feeling like there's some solution to it other than us just doing what the Lord is asking us to do, just taking that Sabbath day and resting and not falling into the patterns of the world. Now I'm just going to read just a little bit of my journal entries. I'm not going to read a ton, but mostly what came out in terms of the attachment step. How did I know that this took me to attachment? So here's what I wrote. And I believe this was when I got to prayer night at church. So I wrote, Lord, I felt like a little girl today, a little girl who has wounds and needs her daddy. I desire to come into my daddy's lap and rest and to know that I am loved. I felt loved by Derek today as he asked what I needed from him, but I had pushed him away. I didn't want to be seen by him because I felt vulnerable, fragile, and little, childlike, and weak. That is what gave me the clue that this has to do with attachment. And I'm going to skip down. I journaled about some patterns that I had and how I responded in relationships in younger years. And then I wrote, what was that? Everything was conditional, chaotic, inconsistent. In fact, consistency felt abnormal and unfamiliar, as was being safe and chosen. I learned that vulnerability is weakness, dependency is foolish, and self-sufficiency is the only way to not get hurt, and people cannot see you weak or you will become prey. And to be a young girl who carried herself is the way to safety. A little bit about my background. I actually moved out when I was 18 and had to become very sufficient at a very young age. And that continued. And I think that is also what has made it hard to stop my central nervous system. I've been hustling for so long in my life and it looks different now. I think that was the one takeaway that I had too is like, I'm still in that hustle, but it's just repackaged differently now. And I wrote down a lot of my losses. Again, name it to tame it. I named some of the losses and meaning some of my things that I'm grieving. And yes, it's exciting that one of my twins left for college, but also that's a loss. It's a transition. Being able to recognize that alongside of that grief and that loss, I was also very grateful that he is going to school. And that's something our brain doesn't do automatically is holding two truths at the same time when they seem like they're opposing, like sadness and gratitude. It seems like they would be in opposition of one another, but they're not. We can have both. Then I also named some of the shame that was lingering that I didn't really recognize, that I was shaming myself for being needy and that was from that woundedness, right? That was from the lie that was true. It was true when I was a child, that to be vulnerable and not be self-sufficient, that was a vulnerability as a child, but that's not true for me now. And so that's how, if we don't transform some of these beliefs and some of these things and heal them, and then they're coming up in the present, it feels true now, but it's not. My husband is a safe person for me now. I am not a little girl who is around unsafe people and having no choice about that. So that's a reflection from my journal that I wanted to share with you. And then the other thing I want to offer to you is a tool called the comfort circle. And then we're going to end here. And then we're going to talk about attachment and the connection to shame next week. I know I'd already done an episode on attachment, but I'm going to bridge it a little bit more with shame on next week's episode of the podcast. But this tool that I want to leave you with, again, it's called the Comfort Circle, and it's from a book called How We Love. And this is a kind of a methodology or kind of the tools, the resources that I use in my work with clients is the How We Love material. And the Comfort Circle is really great. It can be used with really people you want to have a deeper connection with, or you can even do this with yourself. So here are the 12 guiding questions. If you're journaling it for yourself, you would just name what is distressing or upsetting you. So you just literally write that out. Name your specific feelings and then rate those feelings from 1 to 10. Now, we usually we have a feelings wheel, or they're called soul words, and How We Love material, and you find 3 of them in 3 different categories. And then you rank each of those from 1 to 10. And then notice where you feel that physically. So where in your body? And then when you are experiencing that physically, what do you do in response? And then is there any consequence? So what happens when you do that behavioral thing? And then you identify your current beliefs about God, yourself, and others. So when you feel that way, when you do that thing, and then the consequences of that, how does that impact or shape your belief about God, self, and others? And then you connect that to your childhood memory. So how old were you and what happened? And explain how you found relief as a child. So what did you do if you felt this way as a child? And what did you do? And then how much of your current feelings relate to the past versus the present? So it could be 0%. No, I don't think it at all connects. But sometimes, most often, people are really surprised. They're like, wow, yeah, 75, 80%, or 90%. And then state clearly what you need right now. And then if you're doing this with a partner or with someone and they're actually listening to you, then they summarize what they heard you say. And then they can discuss whether they can meet that need for you or not. And you negotiate that. So again, that's called the Comfort Circle. I just wanted to give you another solution tool to use for if you're new to recovery, if you're new to trying to gain insight into your thoughts, your internal world, your heart. Remember when I did this series, and if you're new to the podcast, I did a whole series on the conditions of your heart. And so we don't want to have a hardened heart. And if we have a hardened heart, then we need to somehow start cracking away and getting into where we can actually feel. And generally, beneath a hardened heart is going to be a wound that the hardness of heart was actually just a mechanism. It was the solution to not feel the pain, that you just created these walls as a way to protect yourself. And it's not helpful. It's not conducive to relationships when you're trying to connect with people, and certainly not to get insight. So I'm ending here. God bless. I hope some of this was helpful. I hope I didn't ramble too much as I was walking through this. It's just really what I felt would be most valuable for some of you to actually hear a real life walking through a little bit over a week later of the experience that I had, how I responded as a person in recovery who's been doing a work for a lot of years. And what was helpful, you can see how I'm seeing this now is very different than how I described it as I experienced it before. And those who are in my church community who were actually there that day and who I talked to, they can attest. This is real life. That's exactly what happened. And I was able to get up on stage yesterday and share what I needed to share, and even give a little shout out to my son who is on his own made commitment to making some good choice for himself, and was able to acknowledge him in church for that. So super grateful, blessed. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll connect with you next week. Take care.